Welcome back to the Truth Seeking Network. So I'm going to stay on the story of my last video about Europeans coming to America and in the late 1800s, early 1900s, um, because the timeline that America has in its history does not match. And Europeans were still coming into America during this time, and during this time, as I stated in my last video, this is when the race wars began in America because Europeans were coming from all places in Europe, and even Asians were coming to America. America was the new world to them. And once word got out, people were coming from their continents. Understand this. Over 60 million Europeans came into America from different places in Europe. And the majority of them in the beginning was was men. They were men from 18 to 25 years old in their 20s, early 20s. And why was that? Why was that? Because those are the years of what you call military age, right? 18 to 25 years old. Even now, what did they say? I think they just passed something from up to 25 years. No, it's 26 years old now for register for the draft, right? 18 to 26 years old. Say those are fighting age, the men of fighting age during that time, at that age group. And so during this time, the majority of these people that were coming from Europe, now imagine leaving your home country to come to a place that you have never been before, and you leaving your family, your home, everything that you ever known. Now, a lot of time things y'all don't understand in their areas is though they were living in poverty. There was a lot of plagues and things going on in Europe. But America was the new world. And we know who lived in the new world, right? As it states in the 1828 Webster's Dictionary. They said the American, right? Originally applied to who? The copper color races found here by Europeans, but now descendants of Europeans born in America are now the Americans. So what happened to the copper color people that they never show that were already here? And then the ones that they do show you, as I stated, I showed you, and I'm gonna show it in this video again, because now the Native American is become somewhat European looking. And none of them are copper color at all. But they are now the indigenous well, that's why they call themselves Native Americans, because they are not the Aboriginals. They're not the original Americans. But these cities that you see, that we're going to see, were already here when the Europeans arrived. And many of them arrived like the late 1800s, the mid to the late 1800s to 1900s to America. And they were coming in by the thousands on them ships, steamships, coming from Europe. So if there were cities already here, because they couldn't have built it because they were just still arriving. But the cities predate the people coming in. And I want y'all to understand that. But we have their historians and their people now telling lies, and their history and their timelines have always been twisted, as I showed you in my last video, and as I'm going to show you in this video. Because if we had Black cities and towns that were being burned down by jealous whites, then obviously who was here already? But then they tell us with their twisted history that they freed us after slavery. And then all of a sudden we built some cities after 1865. And then after that, by 1900, jealous whites came in and they just took over our cities. But wait a minute, we didn't get the 40 acres and a mule. So if we didn't get the 40 years in Mule and we didn't have any cities, but when you would read a lot of history stuff, they say we didn't even get cities, that we went working for our old slave masters. So where did all these black cities come from then? So-called black cities. And if Tulsa, Oklahoma was burnt down by jealous whites in 1921, then how long was the city up and running before that? The city wasn't built in 1920 and then got burnt down in 21. That city had to be there for a while. But there were cities, and see, we focus on Oklahoma, but there were cities all across America, and they were all our cities. But they were steadily bringing in Europeans from Europe into America. And as we're going to see in this video, from 18 to 20, they were mostly men at first. And I'm going to show you why they brought them men in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video. Let's get to it. I'm not going to maybe play the whole thing, but I'm going to play partial of it.
Decades of relatively little immigration into America after its founding, in the 1830s, tens of thousands of immigrants began arriving on her eastern shores, again mainly from Britain, Ireland, and Germany. Some were attracted to the cheap farmland that was made available by westward expansion, while others took advantage of the manufacturing boom in the cities sparked by the Industrial Revolution. The Irish were mainly unskilled laborers who built most of the railroads and canals, took jobs in the emerging textile mill towns in the Northeast, or worked in the ports. About half of the Germans became farmers, mainly in the Midwest, and the other half became craftsmen in urban areas. Asian immigrants, mainly from China, began crossing the Pacific to work as laborers, particularly on the Transcontinental Railroad or in the mines.
Immigration also during the 19th century was usually male-dominated, males in their prime working years between the years of 18 to 25. The Irish being the one exception. Eventually there would be more Irish women who...
So you know what he just said, right? He just said the majority of them were white males and 18 to 25 years old. And they also show Asian people coming here. Now, there are other videos that you will see, they showing that Asians weren't allowed. They were kicked back. But so all these other immigrants were coming from other countries into America. And what they say, mostly men. Okay, so y'all hold that. So I'm gonna get to my next video, and we're gonna show you what happened when those men got to America and saw what they saw, the jealousy that came after that. So this is the video. It's gonna show you some of the black towns. I didn't make this video. You can watch it on YouTube. A lot of our people, because of the history, they are miseducated, and we are trying to re-educate our own people, because a lot of the slave history story, a lot of the so-called of them bringing us from Africa into America, a lot of our people believe those stories. They think that we came here from Africa, but these same people are not using their minds and thinking. They're not using their brains at all. And that's the sad part, because, and well, I don't blame them, because I mean, that's all they were taught, but that's what this government curriculum, school curriculum teaches. So I really don't blame them to think that we actually came from America, especially with movies like Roots and Armistead and all these slave stories, 12 Years a Slave and stuff like that. These stories, these fictional stories that were created. And once you see something in your mind and you picture it in your mind, they show it on TV, you tend to believe it. And that's why I call it tell lie vision. Because the television, it tells a lie to your vision, right? And Hollywood, it's a lie. It's a spell that they put you under. And so the history that it was taught that we were brought here from slave ships from Africa. And then now what part in history did we have cities built? If we were slaves and we were being beaten and we were sold and we didn't have anything, how did we get all these cities all across America all of a sudden? And if we were freed in 1864, between 1863 and 1865, then we had what, 20 years to make a city, 30 years to make it before 1900? But we already had cities. These cities were here before the Europeans came to America. Just like Tulsa, Oklahoma. That city wasn't built in 1921. People don't understand how long that would took to have built that. There were cities, towns, there were stores. People had houses all across the area. How long do you think it took to build all that up with the materials? But we had these cities all across the country. And where were the Native Americans? If we had cities that Europeans were coming in and got jealous of us, then where were the Native American cities at? Because when did we build our cities as opposed to them having cities? Because the Native Americans should have had cities everywhere. It should have been Native American cities all throughout the Americas. But guess who had the cities? We did. And if we had the cities that the Europeans were jealous of, then where was the Native American? But the time, because and also we were supposed to be just slaves, right? We were on the plantations being beaten and whipped and hung. We had prominent cities that we owned. Where did that come in at? See, that's why I said the history here is lies, it's twisted. It's lies. Because after slavery, we didn't get the 40 acres and a mule. We didn't get it. So if we didn't get the 40 acres and the mule, then how did we have where these cities come from? These cities were already here. And they've been erased, and they're not telling you the truth of what really happened in America. And the majority of Europeans came to this country in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. And that's when these race wars began. That's when the majority began. Because, and just like in that past video, the one that was displayed, he said the majority of them Europeans were coming were 18 to 25, and they were mostly men. And that was done on purpose because those men came to take over. And now I'm going to play this video, and you're going to see that.
Of January, and they did not stop burning and shooting and hanging and lynching until January the 7th.
June 1st, 1921 was the day Tulsa's Greenwood District.
Say this real quick. This right here, this video is not my video. I'm showing this video for educational purposes. So, like, again, this is not my video, but I'm showing this video for educational purposes. Okay, I just want to make that known. But it relates to what I'm saying, what I'm trying to portray to the people out here. That the history in America is lies, and that we were all just slaves, that we all came over on slave ships. And as we see the ships that came in, these had steamships. There was no slave ships in the 1600s. There were no motors on those ships. You can't put a sailboat in the Atlantic Ocean and drive and go from the east coast of the United States to Africa in hurricane-infested waters on a sailboat. And you're supposed to bring 12 million slaves to America. Impossible. Second of all, what was the cleaning supplies for those ships and so forth? So there's a lot of issues with that story, that them bringing us 12 million of us from Africa all the way over here to America, as we're going to see that we just showed in that video, between the late 1830s all the way to the Europeans were still coming into America. So they were just getting here with it. Then they would have had slaves. So a lot of this history is definitely it's false history, and it's time to debunk it. Okay, these cities and towns wasn't made in one day, and this was all across America. Some were drowned out, burned out, or just plain out taken over or erased by Europeans. Now, why would they erase the history? Because they didn't want people to know that America was a so-called indigenous or melanated land, or we call Negro land, right? No, not what we call, what they call Negro land. It was, and then they showed that because remember, we were supposed to be inferior. According to Charles Darwin and everyone, we're supposed to be inferior, and we're not supposed to be as intelligent as other people. So this goes against all the things that they were taught, that they were smarter. Because now, if you go back and look at the time frame during this time in the 1800s and the 1840s, 30s, 40s, and so forth, Europe, they were living in the slums over there. They had plagues and disease going on. And that's why a lot of them end up migrating to America to leave where they came from. So if they couldn't build in their own where they came from, then what makes you think they came over here and just got intelligent all of a sudden and started building up everything? Remember, they was fleeing from where they came from to the New World, America, where the so-called Negroes were, the Negro land, where the copper-colored races were found by the European. And they didn't find us here. I hate that word. They said they found us. Oh, look what I found. It's like you walking down the street and you pick up, oh, I found a $20 bill laying on the ground. No. We originated from this land. We have always been here. And we had cities and towns. We didn't live in teepees. Those squatters that came off the Siberian, from Siberia, those people, squatters, they lived in teepees. But we are the original people that had cities already on this land when the Europeans got here. And that jealousy, when they got here, that's why they said in 1825, they were bringing over an army. And this is what I think people fail to understand. They were bringing over an army. And as I play this video, we're going to see what they did.
District, known as the Black Wall Street, was left in ashes. In a span of 24 hours, the wealthiest black community in America was reduced to rubble. The Tulsa Massacre was a brutal reminder of the deadly consequences of racial hatred and economic envy. As the smoke cleared, the true extent of the devastation became clear. 35 city blocks destroyed, over 1,200 homes reduced to ash, and an estimated number of 300 lives lost.
What's the big deal about Tulsa? What makes Tulsa significant than any other city? Well, you've come to a place where not only a terrorist attack occurred, but that terrorist attack, there was no justice that followed that terrorist attack.
The survivors would pick up whatever piece was left of their lives forever changed by the trauma of that day, says Ruth Avery, a survivor of the Tulsa Massacre.
I never thought I'd see the day when my community would be destroyed. It was like the world was coming to an
straight
end.
American Indian.
The Tulsa Massacre was a tipping point in American history, exposing the dark underbelly of racism and oppression that continues to haunt us today. But Tulsa was not an isolated incident. From Rosewood to Elaine and so many other cities, the pattern of racial violence and destruction repeated itself. Tulsa was just the beginning. Across America, so many thriving black cities and towns were targeted, destroyed, and erased from history.
So where did they come from, y'all? What are these black towns and cities if we were slaves? Think about it. And some of these cities were in the 1800s, early 1900s, before, and also what he said, the the wealthiest black city. That wasn't the wealthiest one. There were many of them. We had cities all across this nation. All across this nation, we had them. So where did they come from if we were slaves? If we had black cities and towns, then obviously, guess what? The slavery story is off. Because in 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, 1900s, Tulsa wasn't built in one day, y'all. Nor were the other cities. Some of the cities were destroyed in 1902, 1903, 1880s. Black cities is a story. So where did they come from? And you ain't not building the city in 20 years. You ain't building that city that fast. And all across this nation, everywhere. Because according to, according to history, we didn't get our 40 acres and a mule. And most of the so-called slaves, according to them, went back to their masters to serve, to work as sharecroppers under their masters. So where did all these cities come from then? Well, anyway, enough of that. Let's get back to the video.
Their stories silenced, their legacies lost. Until now, the destruction of black cities and towns was a result of systemic racism, white supremacy, and economic envy. There were quite a number of these towns then, over 50 black cities and towns, blooming with all kinds of development and amenities for the hardworking black Americans who were living in them and endeavoring.
By calling yourself Black Americans, you definitely blacked out yourself. Black is the adjective, and we didn't call ourselves by our color. Just like Chinese people nobody calls by their color but us. People from Ethiopia, and they call themselves Ethiopian. Or people from Ghana, they're Ghanaians. But we in America, we're just black. No, black was used to black you out. Black is the adjective. A noun is a person, place, or thing. Okay? Not black. Black is the adjective. And we didn't call ourselves black. We didn't call ourselves Negro. We didn't call ourselves colored. These were names that they called us. African American was another name given to us in 1988. That's when we first, why wouldn't we call in 1940s, we weren't called African Americans? People would have said, what is an African American? But they called us colored. We called ourselves colored. They called us Negro. We called ourselves Negro. And in 1960, after what James Brown came in, Black and I'm Proud, then we started calling ourselves Black people, Black Power, and all this stuff. But we are the American Indians, and now we have misidentified and misclassified our own selves out of our own history because we listened to the curriculum that the government gave us. But fortunately, throughout our families and our history and our grandmothers and our grandfathers, they told you that you were the Indian. They told you that you were Blackfoot, Cherokee, or whatever, or Choctaw, or you was one form or the other, or from tribe you came from. Luckily, we still had it run into our families, and our families told us this real history. But we have got to stop calling ourselves Black people. Because what is Black? See, Black has no standing in law. This government made no treaties with Black people. It made no treaties with Negroes. It made no treaties with African Americans, but it did make treaties with American Indians. And that's who you are. You are the American Indians, and that's still a misnomer because they call us the American Indians, right? But we went by tribal names. We didn't go by a color. We are not a color in the crayon box. Okay? We're not a crayon. That's not who we are. But in all of our saying, we call ourselves Black cities, Black towns, and we have our people calling ourselves African American. We need to stop these misnomers. We are the Americans, as I'm going to show you in this video.
All they can to keep their communities habitable. These communities were thriving independently with successful businesses, schools, and cultural institutions. But the success of these cities was seen as a threat to white dominance. Instead of emulating from the good works they had noticed going on in these black towns, white Americans resorted to doing just what they're known to do best: destruction, chaos, and death. In those days, violence, intimidation, and forced displacement were the weapons used by white communities to maintain marginalization and racial control on blacks by every means. What it feels like to be black was nothing short of unearthly pain for our black ancestors in that era. However, before we go forward, kindly consider subscribing if you are yet to. Hit the thumb button in front of you and share with friends and families to keep spreading consciousness. Your support means a lot to us. Now let us dive into the events of this dark history of the thriving black cities that were destroyed by whites, starting with 1. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Greenwood District.
I will never forget the violence of the white mob when we left our home. I still see black men being shot, black bodies lying in the street. I still smell smoke and see fire. I still see black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead. I hear the screams. I have lived through the massacre every day. Our country may forget this history, but I cannot.
During an emotional testimony on Capitol Hill on Wednesday, Fletcher, who is now 107, recalls her memories of the two-day massacre that left hundreds of black people dead. In the early 1900s, Greenwood was a beacon of black excellence, with over 300 businesses, including banks, hotels, and newspapers. Tulsa, Oklahoma, was founded in 1882, and by the early 1900s, it had become a thriving oil town. Greenwood was a self-sufficient community with its own schools, hospitals, and newspapers. It was a place where black people could thrive, free from the racial tensions of the time. But as Tulsa grew, so did racial tensions. The white residents had become increasingly resentful of Greenwood's success, although segregation laws had enforced separation between black and white communities. Despite segregation laws, racial tensions remained high, and in one occasion of racial clashes, whites had unleashed their pent-up fury against the African American community, revealing deep-seated animosity and hostility. It all started on May 31.
You see what I'm saying? Right there, stop. You see that? He said African American communities. They wasn't called no African Americans in 1920 or 21. There wasn't such thing as an African American or black. And that's why I said these misnomers. By saying you came from Africa, by saying you did it, where in 1882 did they get the wherewithal to build all these bricks and cities and stuff like that from if they didn't have any money? See, you have got to use your brains, people. Come on. These towns and cities, when this come up out of nowhere. And as I show you in the videos, it was Europeans coming to America. They were still coming into America. So where is the native at? Because these were our towns and our cities. We're not African American. That name didn't even exist. Yet they put it in this video. And these are the things I'm talking about that has got to stop. We have got to stop this African American thing and black thing. Nobody goes around calling themselves colored no more, but they're going, y'all, come on. You still call yourself Negroes, they still call themselves black, and they still call themselves African Americans. These are all misnomers to hide your identity as the true Americans. Now, these white mobs that were coming into America, coming to our cities, were jealous of us. If they were so bright and so smart, why didn't they just build on their own? Because they were segregated because we had our own areas. And as they were bringing in more immigrants, they encroached upon our areas. And the more of them came, they took over our areas and our land. And it's so easy to see. We were prominent. We had things. So this is ridiculous. And adding African American to these new videos that you put out and you're showing it to our children, they'll think that we all came from Africa on slave ships. And a lot of these videos, people, you have got to stop. This is so-called Black History Month. And that's the reason I'm doing this video, to wake people up of the lies. Stop calling yourself what you are not. You are not two continents. You have always been here.
1921, 18-year-old shoe shiner named Dick Rowland entered a Drexel building, an office located at 319 South Main Street in Tulsa. He needed to use a public bathroom, but because he was a black, segregation laws restricted him from using facilities located at the down part of the building, so he had to use the bathroom at the top. Getting there required taking the elevators, and the 19-year-old shoe shiner stepped into the elevator. On getting there, he met 17-year-old Sarah Page, a white lady who was working as the elevator operator. The chance encounter between the two individuals sparked a chain of events that would change the city forever. According to Page, Rowland grabbed at her arm and attempted to kiss her, prompting her to push him away and flee the elevator in fear. But Rowland's version of events told a different story. He claimed to have simply tripped and stumbled into the elevator, denying any wrongdoing. As the news of the incident spread like wildfire, the white community seized upon Page's account, fueling racial tensions and outrage. The media sensationalized the story, portraying Rowland as a criminal and Page as a victim. Some witnesses reported hearing Page scream and seeing Rowland flee the scene, while others whispered that the encounter was consensual. The truth, however, remained elusive, lost in the chaos and destruction that followed. Knowing definitely well that the event might make him the target of an angry white mob, Rowland fled to his mother's house in Greenwood for refuge. Unfortunately, the police located and arrested him. In no time, rumors that Rowland will be lynched began spreading like wildfire, and by 7:30 p.m. on that same day, hundreds of residents were gathered outside the courthouse. At exactly 8:30 p.m., 3 men entered into the courthouse demanding that Rowland be handed over to them. But McCullough, the newly elected local sheriff, sternly refused and sent the 3 men out. By 9:30 p.m., the crowd had swelled into thousands, and the sheriffs vastly outnumbered. It was about this time that a group of 50 to 60 armed black citizens arrived at the courthouse in order to support the sheriffs. And again, the sheriffs turned down their offer. Sadly, their arrival had prompted many of the white citizens to head home for their guns. At 10 p.m., a second group of black armed men arrived to support the sheriffs as well, but again, they were turned down. As they were leaving the courthouse, a white man approached one of the black armed men, calling him a racial slur, and at the same time, trying to take his gun, thereby sparking an altercation. In an instant, the situation escalated. A single gunshot pierced the air, and chaos erupted. Panic and violence spread like wildfire, unleashing a maelstrom of gunfire, shouts, and screams. Both sides began to fire, and the small group of black citizens was outnumbered 20-1. As a reason, this group of black citizens were forced to retreat towards their neighborhood, Greenwood, in an attempt to escape the violence and find safety. Unluckily, the gunfight followed them the whole way, thereby leading to massive killings of innocent black citizens. Calling the incident a Negro uprising, the local police deputized over 500 men, many of whom were members of the lynched mob. These new deputies were instructed to arm themselves and shoot any black they met on the street. The violence spread throughout Tulsa's black neighborhood, Greenwood, with white mobs attacking homes, businesses, and churches. White pilots flew planes overhead, dropping incendiary bombs and shooting at black residents. Greenwood was destroyed, with the entire city blocks reduced to ashes, leaving thousands of black residents homeless and displaced. Greenwood was left in ruins. The Oklahoma National Guard was deployed to restore order, but not before the devastation was complete. Over the next 24 hours, the mob destroyed 35 city blocks, burned over 1,200 homes. Although official reports at the time glossed over the carnage, claiming only 36 lives lost, 26 blacks, 10 whites. But the Red Cross, witnessing the devastation firsthand, estimated a staggering 300 fatalities. The NAACP, fighting for justice, believed the true number lay between 150 to 200. In the end, it didn't matter what really happened in that elevator. The damage was done. The seeds of hatred and violence that had been sown, and the city of Tulsa would never be the same again. The violence was not merely a reaction to the elevator incident, but a manifestation of long-held racial hatred and fear, fueled by systemic oppression and discrimination. The Tulsa race riot still remains one of the darkest chapters in American history. 2. Rosewood, Florida.
The town of Rosewood was a small, predominantly black community not too far from Gainesville. It was destroyed at the hands of an angry racist mob. All that's left, their descendants who continue to tell their stories.
It was almost like this picture-perfect place.
On January 5th, 1923, a mob of over 200 white men attacked the black community in Rosewood, Florida, killing over 30 black women, men, and children, burning the town to the ground, and forcing all survivors to permanently flee Rosewood. This is what went down. On January 1st, 1923, in Sumner, Florida, a young married white woman named Fannie Taylor claimed she had been assaulted by Jesse Hunter, a black man who had escaped a prison chain gang. Though there was no evidence against Mr. Hunter, local white men launched a manhunt in Rosewood, a nearby town of about 200 black people. On January 2nd, a mob of white men kidnapped, tortured, and lynched Sam Carter, a black craftsman from Rosewood, on the suspicion that he had helped Jesse Hunter escape. White mobs would continue to terrorize Rosewood searching for Mr. Hunter, and black residents would arm themselves in defense. Late on the night of January 4th, a white posse fired into the home of black Rosewood resident Sylvester Carrier, whom they suspected of harboring Mr. Hunter, and killed an elderly woman. A gunfight between Carrier and the mob would last into the early morning, killing people on both sides. Outraged that black residents had fought back, the posse left the scene to regroup and returned with more men. On January 5th, a mob of between 200 to 300 white men attacked Rosewood, killing an estimated 30 to 40 black men, women, and children on sight, and burning the town to the ground. Most black residents would later flee into the woods, while others fled by train to Gainesville, Florida, never to return. Survivors later recounted that Fannie Taylor had made false accusations against Jesse Hunter to conceal her extramarital affair with a white man. Number 3, Washington, D.C. In the sweltering summer of 1919, Washington, D.C. was a city on edge. The Great War had ended, but the fight for equality and justice had only just begun. African-American soldiers, fresh from battling for democracy abroad, returned home to find themselves denied the same rights and respect they had fought for. Tensions simmered, fueled by housing shortages, job competition, and the ever-present specter of racial prejudice. The city's streets were a powder keg, waiting for a spark to ignite the flames of violence. That spark came on July 20, 1919, when a white woman accused a black man of assault. White men, many in the armed forces, responded to the rumored arrest of a black man for the rape of a white woman, with 4 days of mob violence against black individuals and businesses. They rioted randomly, beating black people on the street and pulling others off streetcars for attacks. When the police refused to intervene, the black population fought back. The violence raged on for days. Sounds of gunfire, screams, and shattering glass filled the air as the city teetered on the brink of chaos. In the end, the riots left deep scars on the city and its people. The death toll mounted with at least 15 lives lost and over 150 injured, with property damage of over $100,000 to $200,000, approximately $1.5 million to $3 million in today's dollars. This left the streets littered with the remnants of shattered lives and broken dreams. Number 4, Colfax, Louisiana. On April 13, 1873, a white militia attacked the town of Colfax, Louisiana, killing an estimated 60 to 150 black residents. The violence was sparked by a disputed gubernatorial election, with white Democrats seeking to overthrow the newly elected Republican government. The militia, mostly ex-Confederates, targeted the town's black majority, who had been exercising their newfound voting rights. The attackers used cannons, guns, and fire to destroy the town, killing many black residents, including women and children. Some were shot while trying to surrender, while others were burned alive in their homes. Despite the fact that the Colfax decimation made national headlines at the time, the incident was quickly...
See that right there? See the original paper right there? Nearly 300 Negroes burned to death by whites in Louisiana. See that? So, again, Where was the Native Americans? And you see, we weren't called African Americans. During that time, they called us Negroes. And we were colored, and then we became black. But they were Negroes, and they called us Negroes. They actually called us the American Negro. They never said back then that we were African. They called us the American Negroes. And people don't understand that. And like I said, these white mobs, they were bringing these white men into America. They was like armies. And they were destroying our cities and towns and taking over. That's what that was. They were shipping them in by the thousands at a time and bringing them in there, and they were taking over. And as you can see in the video, what we just played, it showed that in 1873, that black town, so-called black town, you see they were dressed prominently. They had their clothes on. But they wanted to believe that after 1865, 1864, and 1873, they built the town. And they had dressed in nice, and they had voting. They was voting, and see, our people were getting into the American system. We were actually trying to get into their system, that was a flaw. We should have never tried to get into their system because we were a separate people. But just like today, our people want to follow all the traditions. We follow all the holidays. We want to do Christmas. We want to do Thanksgiving. And y'all don't know the history behind none of this stuff. St. Patrick's Day, you got a fake New Year's Day on January the 1st, but they changed in 1752 from the spring to January the 1st, March 25th to January the 1st. And most people don't know this stuff. And you just follow all the histories, all the traditions, and thinking it's yours. And it's not. But these cities and towns, and it says Negro, but he gonna hear this man in this video say African American, and that's whom we are not. We are not African American. These cities and towns were here by the copper colored people that were already in this land, which they call black people. And see, that's the part they don't show, that this place originated with us. It has always been here. We have always been here, and we have always had towns and cities. They were the newcomers. They were the immigrants. They were the people that were coming here on ships. We were already here.
Forgotten. In 1921, local officials erected a memorial to the 3 white militia members who died. The inscription on the memorial calls the white militia members heroes who died fighting for white supremacy. To a large extent, these actions show that they had complete disregard for the value of the black lives lost. The Colfax Massacre was a brutal example of racial terrorism, aimed at suppressing black political power and maintaining white supremacy in Louisiana. The event marked the end of Reconstruction in the state and led to the rise of Jim Crow laws. Only 3 white men were ever charged, and none were convicted. Number 5, Thibodaux, Louisiana. The Thibodaux liquidation, a dark and pivotal event in American history, unfolded in the sleepy town of Thibodaux, Louisiana, in November 1887. This tragic incident was the culmination of a long simmering labor dispute between African American sugarcane workers and white planters, set against the backdrop of the post-Reconstruction era's racial tensions. In the late 19th century, Louisiana's sugar industry was booming, with Thibodaux at its epicenter. Thousands of African American workers toiled in the fields, often under grueling conditions and for meager wages. As the Knights of Labor and the Louisiana Sugarcane League began organizing workers, demands for better pay, working conditions, and union recognition grew louder. On November 1st, 1887, approximately 10,000 workers went on strike, refusing to return to the fields until their demands were met. The strike's leaders, including prominent African American activists, called for peaceful protest and negotiation. However, local white planters and law enforcement saw the strike as a threat to their power and profits.
You see how that name, I'm sorry, y'all. That name African American is so misleading. And this is what we do. We interchange Black, Negro, not African American. These names are misnomers. And back then, those people didn't identify themselves as African American. I'm gonna keep stating that throughout this video because I don't want nobody to be misled. But that is truly misleading when he called them African Americans when they didn't even call themselves that. They didn't call themselves African Americans. And a lot of people back then, they actually told you their tribes, where they come from. They actually knew who they were. Just like my 96-year-old grandmother before she passed, she told me she told us straight out, we ain't not Africans. We didn't get here by no slave ships. We were already here. We were already in the land. That's why we knew how to farm and grow. People didn't come from Africa and nothing. People in Africa didn't come over here and know how to farm this land. They wouldn't even know the crops to grow because this is a whole new landmass. We didn't have the same fruits, same anything. They wouldn't come over here and just all of a sudden know how to grow and, produce our fruit and work our lands. So you got to use common sense.
The situation escalated on November 2nd when white vigilantes, including local law enforcement and sugar planters, attacked striking workers in their homes. Clashes erupted and violence spread throughout Thibodaux. Over the next few days, white mobs rampaged through the town, killing an estimated number of 30 to 60 African Americans, although some reports put the death toll higher. The violence was brutal and indiscriminate, with workers, their families, and even bystanders targeted. Many were shot, beaten, or lynched, their bodies left in the streets or dumped in the bayou. Most homes were burnt. The local jail was filled with hundreds of African Americans, arrested and imprisoned without charges, forced to sign contracts agreeing to work for lower wages. Mary P. Terrell, a prominent African American activist, investigated the massacre and advocated for justice. She documented the atrocities and pushed for accountability, but her efforts were met with resistance and silence. Louisiana Governor Samuel Douglas McHenry failed to intervene, allowing the violence to escalate. His inaction emboldened the perpetrators and sent a chilling message that such brutality would be tolerated. In the aftermath, investigations were limited and inconclusive, with no convictions for the perpetrators. The Thibodaux annihilation remained largely unreported or distorted by contemporary accounts. Today, the Thibodaux massacre stands as one of the deadliest incidents of racial violence in U.S. history, a stark reminder of the brutal suppression of African American labor activism during the Jim Crow era. The legacy of this tragedy continues to reverberate, a call to remember and confront the dark corners of America's past. Number 6, Wilmington, North Carolina. The Wilmington, North Carolina annihilation was a tale of politics, power, and racial hatred that culminated in one of the most devastating incidents of racial violence in American history. It began with the rise of the Fusion Party, a coalition of Republicans and populists who sought to challenge the Democratic Party's stranglehold on North Carolina politics. In 1898, the Fusion Party swept the municipal elections in Wilmington, North Carolina's largest city, electing a biracial government. This victory was seen as a threat by the Democratic Party and the city's white elite, who feared the loss of their power and privilege. A campaign of intimidation and disinformation was launched, with Democratic leaders and newspapers whipping up racial tensions and spreading false rumors of African American aggression. The situation escalated when a white newspaper editor, Josephus Daniels, published an inflammatory editorial that sparked outrage among African Americans. On November 10, 1898, a group of African American leaders attempted to respond to Daniels' editorial, but their meeting was disrupted by a white mob. The violence quickly spread, with white rioters attacking African American homes, businesses, and citizens. The Wilmington Light Infantry and the North Carolina Naval Reserve.
I'm going to stop right there. Again, 1898, 1800s. Where did we get these businesses, houses, towns, everything from? That these white mobs came in and destroyed. And where was the Native Americans? I don't see any Native Americans. Do y'all? In none of these stories, you see no Native Americans. You see so-called African Americans. Now, this guy, I don't know who this person is who made the video, but he insists on calling these people African Americans, a name that they did not call themselves, a name that they would have not even recognized at the time. And that's the sickness. That's the only thing about this. See, when you don't know who you are, when you don't know your history, then you will call yourself we call ourselves any made up name that they gave us. And then we destroy our own history by putting those names on these photos in history that go back in time. Well, we were not even called African American. I mean, even in the paper it said Negroes. It didn't say nothing about no African American. They didn't. None of these white folk on this page, well, on this video right here, would know what an African American was. It's a new name that we call ourselves today. Now you're putting that new name back on these people who didn't call themselves that. That's a disgrace. Especially but that's why I said blacking out. When you call yourself black, you're blacking out your own history. All these are misnomers. Black is the adjective, but it's just sad to see that, and because that destroys this video of what really took place about who we really are, what people we really come from, and the reason why we had these black cities and towns, because we always had them. A lot of these houses and stuff were ours, and they erased or burnt them down.
Reserves were called in, but instead of restoring order, they joined the white mobs, killing and driving out African American residents. Estimates suggest that between about 300 African Americans were killed and thousands more were forced to flee the city. The aftermath was just as shocking. The biracial government was overthrown.
So when they fled the city, who took over the city? See, those were armies that they were sending in on those steamships, all those Europeans coming in here, 18 to 25-year-old men. They weren't coming in here to go build houses. They were coming in here to kill, steal, and destroy. And that's exactly what they did. And they stole our history and everything else about us and told us that we all just came from Africa on slave ships. Now this man on this video is calling us an African American. Because you don't know your history. Look at these prominent men standing in front of you. They knew who they were. They were not African Americans. They didn't come from Africa and start putting on suits and stuff. It's ridiculous.
And many African American leaders were forced into exile. The Democratic Party reasserted its control, and the city's African American population was left to pick up the pieces. For all the violent moments in United States history, the mob's gruesome attack was unique. It was the only coup d'etat ever to take place on American soil. Lost in the fire that destroyed the daily record were the lives of black citizens and the spirit of a thriving black community, and also the most promising effort in the South to build racial solidarity. Number 7, St. Louis, Missouri. On July 3rd, 1917, continuing violence raged in East St. Louis, Illinois, as white mobs attacked black residents and destroyed their homes and other properties. The primary outbreak of violence began on July 2nd, 1917, when white residents of East St. Louis and other nearby communities ambushed African American workers as they left.
I'm not gonna play no more of this video. I got enough of this video. I think y'all get the picture, right? That these are white mobs coming into America, destroying who? Our homes, our cities, our towns, right? Not Native Americans. They were our cities and towns. We were always here. And it's a disservice, but I'm just showing you that a lot of our history is twisted with the lies of us coming off slave ships from Africa. When in fact, we had built these towns and cities already before Europeans got here. And they just said when we fled these cities, Then they took over the cities that we fled from. They took over our cities, our towns, and houses, just like I said in previous videos. So we have got to start teaching the real history of what happened in this country. And then we got to get rid of these lies.
Check out these paintings and drawings done by Europeans who visited the Americas between the 1600s and 1800s. Notice how these so-called Indians or Native Americans look just like us. So when the hell did they start calling us African Americans? I've been telling y'all that term is a trick. We are the Native Americans. We are the Aboriginal Americans. This is our land. These are our ancestors. Do some research.
Behind the term African American, I don't want to be called African American.
Why is that?
I'm not African.
Very strong.
Be known as a Black American. I can't call myself an African American because when they want to separate us, then they say we are African American. But remember this: when I'm competing in the Olympics, I didn't compete on an African American Olympic team. I competed on an American Olympic team. So don't separate me when you want to separate me.
Okay, so y'all heard the last short that Floyd Mayweather did when he called himself a Black American. And I'm saying, even though I put that in there, he showed he didn't want to be called an African American. But still, by him calling himself a Black American, it still is a misnomer. Why? Because we didn't go by Black. And the original definition of an American, as it states, is right in front of you, a Native American originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper color races found here by Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. So we were the Americans at first. We wasn't called Black Americans. We didn't go by a color because there is no other American. And that's what I want y'all to understand. There is no other American. The only Americans are the Aboriginals. And who are they? It's us. It's my people. We are the copper colored people that already been in this land. We had cities and towns before Europeans arrived. Europeans are now calling themselves Americans. But Europeans are not Americans because only Americans can be Americans. And they were so-called the copper color races that were already here, as this definition states. But now apply to descendants of Europeans born in America. So these people came from Europe, like you see on those ships. They came over here. They stole, burned, drowned out our cities and our towns. And these were armies of young men, as I showed you. And they were coming over here on purpose, brought here on purpose, and they did exactly what they came to do, to steal, kill, and destroy. And they destroyed our cities. And now they are the American, and now we are African American. We became colored. We became all other names besides the people who we really are. And we was not Black Americans. Because by saying that you were Black Americans, oh, there must be a white American, there must be another type of American too. No. The Americans, as is stated in this definition, are the copper color races or the brown people that were already here. That was my people. And we have always been in America. We have never come from Africa. And our land and our cities and towns were taken over and stolen. And the cities were here before Europeans arrived. Okay, and they kept loading them over here by the thousands, shiploads, millions, coming into this country and taking over our land. So these videos that I'm doing is only to make right the wrong that we've been taught in schools, that our people came from Africa. Our people were just slaves. Our people didn't have cities. We didn't have towns. We didn't do nothing. We were begging and we were being beaten and everything else. But that's when you saw, even on the video was off still. But even on that video, it shows you what would happen for real. We had towns and cities. Where did they come from? Europeans were still coming from their lands to this land. And as they encroached more, they took over more areas and more areas until they took over our towns where we live. And we were pushed and forced. When we fled, we were forced into the projects or ghettos. And they took over the best places and the best parts of this land. They put their police force in charge. They put their government in charge. They became the lawyers. They became the judges. They became all the people that were in charge of, in the state, in charge of everything. And they made sure that they made themselves the police, as most of them are today. And so the whole justice system, they took over the whole justice system and became them. And now they are the Americans. And they, if you ask them, they're American, and we're African American. And what a misnomer. Again, Americans are the copper color races that were found here, period. Noah Webster, as you see his picture on his page, is not an American. He is a European that came to America, an immigrant. Just like all those immigrants on those ships that came over here, they are immigrants from Italy, they're immigrants from Germany, they're from Britain, from wherever, France. All these people, they were coming from all places in Europe, and they came over to America. And now these people call themselves Americans. But they are not the original Americans. The original Americans, as this definition states, applies to us, the copper color races that were found here before they got here. Let's see. And referring to, see, what does this say on this page? Copper color refers to historically described Native Americans. See, specifically referring to the skin tone, which was often described as having a copper hue by early European settlers, essentially signifying the indigenous population of the Americas as a whole. Now, who you see copper colored? Look at the pictures. Oh, but where are these people at when you see Native Americans? Okay, they don't show us. They show what? They show those Native people, right? And they mostly look European, or what we call $5 Indians today. But now they are the Indians and we are not, which is sad. How many videos do I have to do to show the truth and why what everything they said was lies? What they said, what the history that they teach in schools is lies. We are not African. We have never been African. We have always been here. And the colonizers came, and now the colonizers are now Americans. And we are nobody but the African Americans. And again, where would have the Native Americans at? So if the copper colored people, let's go to images real quick. If a copper colored person looks like Kobe Bryant, which one of these people are copper colored? Because over here is your so-called Native American today who claims to be the people that were here. But as I showed you, where were they in all these cities, all these black cities, all these towns, and all the videos? You don't see anybody that looks like them. Historically, they're not there. But who do you see? It has always been so-called black against white in America, or white against black, should I say, because we were already here first. They came here and they were burning down our cities. They were jealous of us. They wasn't jealous of the Native American. And when I grew up, I didn't see any Native Americans. I seen white folk and I seen so-called black folk. But there was no Native Americans. That's why this Indian on this redskin helmet was taken off, because he reflected a true color of a so-called Indian, a copper tone Indian. And nobody today on those reservations are this color, none. And these facts are not out. Look at these old pictures of America. See, she had a fro. So why is this so hard for everybody to see? Why is this so hard for everybody to understand? It's even here in Google. And look, and I'm not trying to convince this government. This government already knows that we are the Americans. This government already knows that the so-called African Americans now is the true American in this land. We don't have to convince them. They already know. But it's my people who've been misled. That's who I'm trying to show. And a lot of Europeans already know the truth of the history. They know that their parents, that their ancestors immigrated from wherever they immigrated from in the late 1800s or 1900s, and they came to America. But we didn't immigrate here, nor did we come on slave ships. We were already in this land. And these are copper colored people, just like I am. And my family didn't come off a slave ship. We were always here. I mean, it even tells you what your so-called what do you call it? Aborigine is. It's a dark-skinned person, right? So D from what's happening is dark skin, but this girl right here is not copper colored. Copper coloration, she is not. But we shouldn't have to convince people, nor should we be called African American. Look at this. Who is copper colored, y'all? Because these people came from Siberia and they are mixed with Europeans. Now, does she fit the definitions below? Originally applied to the copper color races found here by Europeans? No, because the European looked her color. But this guy is copper color. So we are the Americans. We're not Black Americans. We're not African Americans. We're not colored. See, originally applied to the copper color. See, they took off the word copper and left us colored and started calling us colored only. We became colored, either white or colored. But we are the copper colored people, the brown colored people that was already in this land. It has always been us. And it's time that the truth is get spread throughout everywhere. And I'm glad there's so many people on TikTok, all over YouTube, social media. They are waking up. They are telling it and spreading the truth, our truth, not what we taught in schools that we came from Africa and we were just slaves. It's bullcrap. And I'm tired of it. And I know a lot of us are. All the original people that came to this land, they described so-called Negroes. But they didn't describe the Native American that you see today. They're nowhere in real history. When the black towns and during the civil rights movement, they were not there. If this was their land, they should have been fighting for it. And again, I'm gonna say this: there would be millions. There would have been millions of Native Americans on this continent when they when the Europeans came here. And also, when I grew up in this country, we didn't grow up with no Native Americans, but there would have been millions of them. You could never fit them. You'll be never able to fit them all on a reservation. That doesn't even make common sense. Think about it. If look how big America is. If they were here, they would be everywhere. But you know who you see everywhere? In the woods, in the mountains, in the seas, and no matter where, you see us. But you don't see them. If this was their land, they would have been everywhere. But they are not. We are everywhere. And every book and every historian depicted people that look just like us. And it didn't look like the so-called Native Americans today. It didn't look like them at all. All the pictures were similar to this. See? They were similar to this, similar to that, showing in there you go up there, right? Always show pictures of us. But not them. Okay? Because now you got the Native American today. And they look like these people. So where were these people at? Again, where were their towns and cities? Really? They were nowhere to be found. Where were they? Look at these Native American actors on all of us by saying that these people are the Native Americans. This lady is not a Native American. She is not an indigenous American. She is not copper colored at all. And this is not who any explorers saw when they got here. They didn't even see these people right here. That's not who they saw. They didn't see none of these people. Look at this. American heritage. These are not Americans. And this is sad that we let this go on this long. But like I said, this video is for my people. It's for my people to wake up. These are not American Indians, y'all. You are. These people are not native. When the settlers came in the boat and they saw these people, they looked the same as the white man. The skin tone was almost close to being the same. But this is who the United States Corporation has fooled the world with, to thinking that these people are Native American or so-called the Aboriginal Americans. That's why they call themselves natives, because they are not Aboriginals. What does Aboriginal mean anyway? Let's look that up. What's the meaning of Aboriginal? Meaning, excuse me, back that up. That wow there. You know. See what it says. Go to all. Say related to the indigenous people of Australia. She's been working on, okay. Say, what is it meaning? Belonging to the indigenous people of Australia. Say, listen, like a person belonging to the indigenous people of Australia. See, let's face it, his history. Because Australia wasn't the only place that had indigenous people. So let's get a meaning for this. who have been from the earliest time. So I'm relating to the people who have been in a region from the earliest time, or relating to Aboriginal languages, Aboriginal tribes, customs, and specifically, I said so. Basically, from the people who have been there at the earliest time. Let's see. Let's get a full meaning. Let's see. A member of a people to inhabit an area, especially as contrast with an invading or colonizing people. And see, that's who we are in America. We are a member of the original people to inhabit an area, especially as contrast with invading or colonizing people. And that's who the Europeans now, who are now the Americans, called Americans in America. They are the colonizer or invading people, and we are the original people that have already been in America. All right. So again, what can I say? I showed you in this video that we are the true Americans and that we are Americans. We're not Black Americans. There's no such thing as a white American. I said there's only one American. And no matter how many people come to this land and how many people get US citizenship and claim to be Americans, they are not Americans. They are from who they are from and where they are from. They are immigrants. And they have come into this country and now they claim to be Americans. These are facts. And so-called Black people, so-called African Americans, so-called Negroes, so-called colored people, you are the American. The ones that have already been here, not the ones that came from Africa who willingly come from Africa now and come over here. You are from where you're from in Africa. You are not American. But we are the Americans that always have been in this land. We did not come from slave ships. We never came from slave ships. And most of us were not slaves. That's another lie. But all this month, they're going to be showing you slave movies and slave stories. And that's the only thing we know about. So we call ourselves based on, because we got to do the research of our own history. Anyway, y'all, I'm talking too much. That's enough. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace till next time. I'm out.
Aborigine, which means what? Black folks. But you never find a white aborigine. Rather, aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are aborigines, but you don't like to be called an aborigine. You want to be called an American.
You have said that you resent the idea of being called an African American, that
Yes.
you are a Black American.
Yes.
Explain.
I think that when they call Black people who were born and raised for generations in this country, if you accept the handle of African American, that says that you don't accept being an American American. You don't accept being born in Chicago or New York or Detroit or wherever you were born. For generations, your family has been here, you know? Built this country too. Sweat and tears and all that, you know, fought in every war, okay? So this is my country here. So I don't want to be called African American. I'm an American American. My people have died and done everything for this country.